Under the leadership of Ataturk back in the 1920s, Turkey became a secular state. Not an Islamic state, but a secular state. And now the ruling authorities are trying to turn it into an Islamic state. And a lot of the Turks don't like it. So tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets. They're protesting against their government's attempt to turn their country into an Islamic state.
Hundreds of riot police with water cannons lined around the Prime Minister's office, and a man died in one of the protests. George Thomas has this look at the unfolding drama.
It began as a peaceful demonstration over a disputed construction project, but quickly escalated into nationwide protests against the Turkish government. Crowds chanting, "Jump, jump if you're not for Tayyip." Recep Tayyip Erdogan is Turkey's prime minister. This crowd wants him and his government gone. In the famed Taksim Square in the heart of Istanbul, tens of thousands are accusing the prime minister of trying to impose strict Islamic reforms on a country that has deep secular traditions.
This is not Taksim Square anymore. This is Tahrir Square. This is Red Square. This is the square of the revolution. We will be here until Tayyip leaves.
Since coming to power in 2002, Erdogan has lifted the ban on women wearing headscarves, built 17,000 mosques, banned kissing in public, and recently passed a law restricting the sale and advertising of alcohol. Signs, protesters say, of a creeping Islamization of Turkey.
We are continuing this resistance. It started 3 to 4 days ago. People don't see what's happening to our country.
Demonstrations have hit 48 cities across the country. Police are accused of being heavy-handed. Turkey is a key American ally in the region, but the U.S. Secretary of State called Erdogan to show restraint.
We are concerned by the reports of excessive use of force by police.
At the heart of this crisis, experts say, is a battle between secular, liberal-minded Turks and those who want to turn the country more conservative, more Islamic. George Thomas, CBN News.
You remember the Ottoman Empire was the powerhouse, and when the Ottoman Empire fell, Turkey was called the sick man of Europe, but it is European, and so it's a bridge between Europe and the West and the Middle East. And it has gotten more and more European. They have a thriving stock market. They have thriving businesses, and they don't want to go back to Islam. So Erdogan has made a mistake, and, well, we wish the rebels well. Well, here at home, the crazy man who shouted Allah Akbar when he began killing people out in Texas at Fort Hood, he now says he's going to be his own lawyer. And Lee Webb has more on that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
That's right, Pat. Nidal Hassad is planning to use a legal strategy called the defense of others. Hassad is an American-born Muslim, and he may argue he was trying to protect fellow Muslims in Afghanistan from the U.S. soldiers on his base in Texas. Those soldiers were set to go to Afghanistan, where they may have fought other Muslims. Hassad opposed the Iraq and Afghanistan war. He himself was set to be deployed in the weeks before that mass shooting. Victims are outraged. The former Army psychiatrist will now be allowed to question the same wounded soldiers he's accused of shooting. They fear he will try to intimidate witnesses. Pat?
Well, Lee, you know, this guy was crazy, and the psychiatrist who studied him understood he was crazy or mentally deranged. He should never have been put on active duty. He should never have been allowed near weapons. And suddenly he kills a number of innocent servicemen, as I say, with that Muslim shout, you know, God is great. And to say it's, you know, they said, well, it's an incidence of civil unrest. It's no such thing. It's more evidence of the Muslim philosophy that has taken over these people. And to allow him to rant in court and to abuse the very people that he shot, it's horrible to even contemplate. Lee?
Conservative groups targeted by the IRS are telling their side of the story to Congress. Several of the groups say their applications for tax-exempt status were delayed, and agents asked intrusive and unnecessary questions about who gave them money, their political views, and even how they prayed. Leaders of 6 of the groups are testifying in front of the House Ways and Means Committee. It's one of 3 congressional committees investigating the IRS scandal. The Justice Department is conducting a separate criminal investigation. Acting IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel says he knows the agency has to correct its problems.
The agency stands ready to confront the problems that occurred, hold accountable those who acted inappropriately.
But Republicans want to see just what action the IRS will take. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia warns that the High Court's ruling on a DNA case could lead to a police state. The court ruled that police can take DNA samples without a warrant from suspects arrested for serious crimes. 5 of the justices said DNA testing was a legitimate procedure, just like fingerprinting. 28 states and the federal government now take DNA swabs after arrests. Privacy advocates, though, argue that taking a suspect's DNA without a search warrant violates the Fourth Amendment. Scalia sided with the High Court's liberals in this dissent. He wrote, "Make no mistake about it, as an entirely predictable consequence of today's decision, your DNA can be taken and entered into a national DNA database if you are ever arrested, rightly or wrongly, and for whatever reason." President Obama will focus on cybersecurity when he meets with China's leaders this weekend in California. The White House sees that as a top threat to the U.S. national economy as well as national security. The meeting comes just days after Chinese hackers accessed designs for some of the nation's most advanced weapon systems. U.S. officials are calling it a staggering security breach. Ephraim Graham reports.
The cyber war with China is being called the greatest national security challenge facing the U.S. Now, after months of computer security breaches involving Chinese hackers, officials say the blueprints of at least 29 critical U.S. weapon systems have been compromised. That includes the Black Hawk helicopter, the Navy's missile defense system, and even the state-of-the-art F-35 jet fighter.
It tracks really nicely with Chinese military priorities. How do you beat U.S. air defenses? How do you let China attack our carriers? How do you preserve China's ICBMs from U.S. missile defense? How do you get advantage in the air and in the sea?
A Pentagon study published by the Washington Post says the U.S. sustained staggering losses. The Obama administration has called on China to stop cyber theft. Military experts believe the operation is part of the People's Liberation Army's Cyber Command, authorized by the highest levels of China's military.
It really narrows the gap and it shades the odds in China's direction. We still are militarily superior, no doubt about that, but we're not as superior as we were before all this happened. So some serious risk as a result of these Chinese successes.
It's something we raise very directly with the Chinese, and we're going to do so through diplomatic channels and be very consistent.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Pat, where do you think our relationship with China should go?
Well, I think it should be friendly. We should do everything we can to cultivate warm relations. But the Chinese are saying to us, look, your national security agency spies on us all the time. We have one of the most sophisticated systems of data gathering. It takes in petabytes of data all over the world, and everything they can get their hands on from China, we take too. What we should probably do is, you know, they used to have letters of marque they give to privateers to go out and raid the enemy's ships. And I think we ought to give such letters to some of the computer hackers that are running around our country that are so skillful and say, okay, you go have at the Chinese and see what you can find out. And I think we ought to, you know, have some defense. The best defense is defense is a good offense. But I think we have to recognize these people are just violating all the norms, but they say we're doing it. They say the United States is doing it too, and the truth is we are. But I'm sure we could come up with a Stuxnet we could insert into the Chinese computers that would kind of throw some of their calculations off a little bit and slow down their progress. But our relation with the Chinese should be warm. We're the two great powers in the world, and we're going to have to live in a world together, and we don't want a war with them, and they certainly don't want a war with us. So let's try to make nice and be friends. Lee?
Pat, half of the people diagnosed with a new virus have died, and doctors warn it's only a matter of time before that virus arrives here in the U.S. Charlene Israel has that story.
The world's leading health officials are frantically studying a new mystery virus in an effort to avoid a serious outbreak. It's being called MERS, and so far its victims all have one thing in common. They've either traveled to the Middle East or come in very close contact with someone who did.
We really need, as fast as possible, to learn how to control this virus. We have to try to run faster than the virus does.
49 cases of the new disease have been reported since June. 27 of those cases have died. That's a 52% mortality rate. The first cases were reported in Saudi Arabia, but already people in at least 7 countries have become infected. Health experts compare the virus to SARS. That's the deadly respiratory virus that took off nearly 10 years ago, spreading first between 12 hotel guests and then across the entire globe after those guests got on airplanes. Within 9 months, there were more than 8,000 cases and more than 700 deaths. For now, researchers remain clueless. They know that the symptoms of MERS include fever, chills, and muscle aches, later breathing problems. But it's still unclear what the host animal of the virus is and how it spread to humans. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
A mother in Scotland defied the odds by giving birth to her 3rd set of twins. Doctors say the chances of doing that are 500,000 to 1. Karen Rogers, shown right there, gave birth to twin daughters last week after having 2 sets of twin boys. They're now ages 12 and 14. Karen says her husband did not believe her when she broke the news of her 3rd pregnancy with twins. The Rogers plan to get a bigger car and convert the loft of their home into bedrooms. Pat?
It's obviously the Scots are going to rule the world. They will just outbreed everybody. Double,
well on their way to it.
Double or triple. And Terry, I've got to make a correction. Lee pointed out to me that psychiatrists in the Army are not issued weapons, and so Major Hassan got a weapon from someplace else, but he did have a weapon, and he had a very deadly weapon, and he certainly seemed to know how to use it because he shot a lot of people. So I stand corrected. He wasn't issued a weapon by the United States from what we gather. All right.
Today marks the 24th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protests. The bloody crackdown by the Chinese military drove one of the leaders of the protests into exile and on a faith journey that ultimately led to Jesus Christ. Chai Ling now heads a ministry opposed to China's forced abortions under its one-child policy. She told a U.S. congressional subcommittee that her country may be materially rich, but it is spiritually poor and needs a moral anchor to restrain selfishness and corruption. She believes Christ is China's best hope and prays that Chinese conversions to Christianity will lead to a godly partnership between America and China. President Obama meets with China's new president next week. A Central Florida school district is apologizing for using eye scanning tracking devices on students without their parents' permission. According to Fox News, high-tech eye scanning cameras were used on students at Davenport School of the Arts, Daniel Jenkins Academy, and Bethune Academy in Polk County. The cameras were installed on school buses as part of a security program and captured students' names and identification numbers. But parents were never notified about the system. School officials have now apologized for not giving parents a chance to opt out. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.